Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we are taking a look at another concept. Now, I can't say this is a new concept, but to be honest, I don't know how new or how old this one is. I think it's relatively new, but it's definitely not something from like a recent drop. I'm thinking like earlier this year, Concept reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have a knife here that we like. Would you like to check it out?" I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I looked at it and it had some very favorable attributes that I look for in a knife. So I thought, sure, why the hell not? Let's give the people another review. And what we are talking about here is the Concept NATO. Now, before I go any further into this review, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you like what you see, please do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, follow along, and I will continue to bring you the content. Now, let's take a look at some overall specs on this knife right here. We have an overall length coming in at 7.63 inches, a blade length coming in at 3.3 inches, and a blade thickness at 118 thousandths. Blade material on this guy is very nice to see. S35VN, there it is right there, S35VN. We are looking at a drop point style blade, drop point / spear point maybe, with a flat grind, a handle length coming in at 4.33 inches, and a handle thickness at 514 thousandths. Handle material on this guy is G10 with, as you can see, a pretty nice G10 inlay within the G10. So nice clean fit and finish on the lines here. We have a locking mechanism of a liner lock with a user of a right hand only tip up carry, designed by Valella Knives, coming in at 4.16 ounces. And one of the best parts of this knife, the price, $115.50 for S35. That's not too bad. You know, so there's some really nice fit and finish on here, some S35VN. That's a pretty solid package for $115.50. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We have some significant issues with this knife that we will discuss, and then you can tell me just how significant those issues are to you. But first, let's take a look at some size comparisons. Now, the knife that this reminds me of most of, right here, the Civivi Sokoke, a Ray Laconico design, and they're not identical by any means. They're definitely no spitting images, but just kind of the overall outline and the size and the blade shapes and the handle. I definitely get some big Sokoke vibes from this. Not saying anything, of course, no accusations or anything. I just couldn't help but see some Civivi Sokoke in this. Let's also throw in there the Civivi Conspirator. And I think that will do pretty much what we need for size comparisons. But just in case it didn't, just in case those two weren't enough, I'm going to throw a couple more on the table for you, just because I like you guys. This is the Kaiser Drop Bear, and one more here, the Kaiser Escort. That should do it for everyone. If you're not a Civivi person, you're a Kaiser person, so that should do it. There's those. Now, let's get to talking about this knife. There are some things that I like about it. There are a couple really big things that I don't like about it. When it comes to the blade, it is actually, it's a nice edge. 18 thousandths behind the edge, so it's pretty nice and slicey. Very simple blade shape, which is always nice for EDC. It's hard to beat a drop point, spear point, whatever you want to call this one. Yeah, I mean, it's made for EDC. A blade cutout. This blade cutout here is so important because it literally saves this knife from being completely worthless. Why do I say that? Well, when we get to the action portion of this review, we're going to talk a little more about this front flipper area here, or at least if that's what it's supposed to be. Got a lot to say about that. That's not very good. Jimping. This knife really misses some jimping. It needs jimping very bad for two reasons. One, just the overall shape of the handle. It's not like it has kind of like a forward or a front choilish area up here to keep your finger off the blade. While there's some nice contouring on the handle is relatively comfy in hand. I don't have any issues with the feel of it in hand. But there's nothing that's really gripping or grabbing my hand. There's no jimping on the top or the bottom. There's no milling. There's no nothing. So you know, I wouldn't be super worried about this slipping out of my hand. But if you're one of those people that have like sweaty hands or slippery hands, and you know maybe you're working a little hard, a little too hard, I would be a little concerned about this one sliding up in your hand, just because there's not much there to keep it in place. You know, when I work with something like the Conspirator, it's got that choilish area up here. Or if I'm working with even the Civivi Sikoke here, you got micarta, which is a little more grippier. You have some jimping up here. If I'm working with something like the Spyderco Shaman, of course, I have a finger choil up here. So it's nice to have some type of little extra security up in this area. And there's a little curve here, but there's no jimping. There's no nothing. It's all very smooth. So that smoothness can potentially lead to slipperiness, which is not ideal. You know, I think everyone kind of has their own opinion on that, but I would have loved to have seen something that provided some traction somewhere on the handle or spine of this knife. So it's really missing that. Outside of the fit and finish, now the fit and finish is really good. Like I said before, you have nice fit and finish on the G10 handles. I like the G10 on G10 inlay. I've never been a fan of like G10 within micarta or micarta within G10. Those are kind of like two negatives that just don't make a positive for me, even though I like both those materials. I just don't think they go good together in terms of like an inlay within one another. But the G10 and G10 I like, and the black and orange is a nice combo. So it's a nice handle in terms of fit and finish. The clip is nothing special, but it's nice in terms of like it feels good in the hand. It would have been nice if the screws were assessed, but they're not. But at the end of the day, you also still have enough clearance to get that into your pocket. And then the beveling on the liner lock, or lack thereof, there's really none. Now, what they did do here is they kind of cut in a little more on the other opposite side liner, so you have a little more of an area to get in there, but you still feel that corner of the liner lock, which doesn't feel great. You got to push a little harder. Yeah, it could definitely be better there. I think a little beveling there would be really nice, and it would be almost expected at north of $100, especially when you look at what Civivi and Kaiser and Artisan Cutlery are doing. Knives right around or even under $100 nowadays, they have some beveling there, at least most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. And for $115, I feel like this should have a little extra bit of comfort there on the liner lock that it is noticeably missing. Now, when we get to the action of this knife, this is where I have a really big problem, and it's really kind of a deal breaker for me, in all honesty. So the middle finger flick is very nice on this. Like I said before, the blade cutout saves this knife, literally saves it. It's pretty easy to kick that blade out with your middle finger using the blade cutout. And of course, you can always kind of just do that if you want to, but I mean, not many people do that. We're either flicking or flipping or doing something fun and fidgety. This front flipper is completely worthless, unfortunately. There's not enough. It doesn't even matter how good the jimping is here. That's what I want to be very specific about, is the design of this front flipper tab just doesn't work. Now, if you push really hard and give it all you got, you can. I just cannot do it right now. I have deployed this using the front flipper a couple times, but it's so stinking. It's literally the leverage, the design, the overall leverage is the word. So when you're designing a front flipper, even a regular flipper, it's all about the placement of the flipper, whether it's front or reverse or regular, whatever. But let's just stick with a front flipper. And let's compare it to this Civivi Sikoke to better explain what I'm talking about here. The way Ray Laconico designed this front flipper, he put more emphasis towards the front of the blade. He put more of point may not be the word, but he moved the leverage of the breaking point of the detent. Instead of on the NATO here, it's like right above, almost right above the pivot, and it's very close to where the detent is. So it leaves you a very tight area to hit to break that detent and flip the blade out. As to where the way this is designed, the leverage on the front flipper is more towards the front of the knife. So it's a lot easier to just push and break that detent and pop that blade out. Very nice and very satisfying front flipper here. It makes it very easy when you have an easier point of leverage to get to. Now, when this point where the breaking point is so low and closer to the pivot, it just takes way too much force and effort. There, I finally got it. It's just not enjoyable. And I guarantee you guys, if you got this in your hand, you'd probably be saying the same thing. Let me know in the comments if you bought this knife and you enjoyed the front flipper on it. Please let me know. Maybe I just got one with a heavier detent, but I have never in almost 4 years now of this channel, plus another 4 or 5 years of being into knives before my channel, have I ever struggled this much with a front flipper. Like, I love front flippers. You guys know that. The Pena front flipper series, the Sokoke, everything from Ray Laconical, all the front flippers, I've never had an issue with it. This thing is just, it's not usable. It's not functional in my opinion. And that really, it just kills this knife for me. Because like I said, while the middle finger flicking action is pretty good, I don't want to see a front flipper tab on a knife that isn't usable. And when there's so many other good options out there with great front flippers and great thumb studs or a blade cutout for that second form of deployment, I just find myself passing on this. Even though it is some nice steel and $115 is a decent price, and the overall fit and finish is pretty nice, this is still a knife that ultimately lacks the details to be a knife worth picking up. And what I mean by that is obviously, of course, the front flipper being no good is the biggest issue. That's the ultimate deal breaker. But then also little things like just a lack of jimping back here and a lack of beveling on the liner lock. They just looked over all the details on this knife, I think, or at least some of the more important ones to try and maybe save some cost, or maybe they just didn't, whether it be, I don't know if this was the designer or concept in general. I don't know where the ball was dropped in the production and design of this knife, but the front flipper's not working for me, and the lack of detail it's not quite there. So it's a very mediocre knife for me personally. So with that being said, I probably not one I would recommend. I think Concept is doing a lot of good things. I think a lot of their newer knives have been great to this point. This is not one of them. Let me know what you guys think of this. If you've had it before, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you found it informational. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And until the next one, I'm out.